Hi everyone, it's Alexander Fernandez with another edition of Video Games Real Talk. I have a great guest today, Ewan Johnson. How you doing, man? What's going on?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. I
Uh,
really appreciate you having and coming on the show. Actually, I mean, it's a real opportunity to finally talk about some exciting things happening in the gaming space that I don't think many people fully appreciate and know about. So, Ewan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, your studio, and the special things you guys are doing?
sure. So I'm Ewan Johnson, and I'm the founder of Arcturus Studio, and we are focused on building volumetric video production tools. And that's a mouthful. So the real simple answer is what we do is we enable artists and brands to bring human performance to any sort of spatial media. And the amazing thing about how the world has been evolving is that game engines have become the development environment for social media, for music concerts, or games, and for pure entertainment. And that means a high demand for how do you bring performers, artists, athletes into these worlds. And that's what we help solve.
Okay, so for the uninitiated, volumetric video, that's a
Hmm.
big word. I mean, those are what they call
Yeah,
the dollar words. So help the audience understand what is volumetric video? What are you talking about? It's like,
great.
how would you
Yeah.
explain that?
Happy to. And I'm actually going to start with a related topic. So, most people in the gaming industry are already familiar with motion capture. And motion capture uses a bunch of cameras to capture individual points key to the limb movement of a person, like elbow, wrist, etc. And then an animator goes away and fits a model to that rig and has to run simulations to make the clothing move. It can create very realistic movement, but takes a lot of artist work, a lot of time to build the full character performance. Volumetric video is kind of the next generation of performance capture. And using the same array of cameras surrounding the performance, it actually literally creates a three-dimensional photocopy of the performer, frame by frame. So it is also a way of thinking about it is it's an extension of photogrammetry. So you reconstruct a full set of meshes and textures of the performance. Now, what's unique is it because it is filming, you're capturing every aspect of a person's movement, the nuances of how their skin interacts. You're capturing the cloth and how it's layered and folding and moving. Um, and so it's very realistic. This data, of course, you can imagine is also very data intensive. And that's where our platform and tools come into play because we take and we provide editing tools and distribution tools that can compress this data and can make it very editable. But really, the essence is it is a true copy of the performance.
How many cameras are you using for this? I mean, I remember back in the
Yeah.
day, motion capture was
Mhm.
like, I got 120 Vicon
Yeah.
system running crazy. Where are we at with this type of technology right now?
So the high-end systems being used for feature film production and turnkey entertainment are around 100 to 102 cameras, and it's a mixture. Some of them are pure RGB cameras for the color and the image, and some of them are depth sensing cameras. Some of them are actually projecting a pattern of infrared light onto the surface of the performer, which is being captured by the infrared cameras to help guide this photogrammetry process. But what's really amazing is with machine learning and AI, there are teams that have released capture systems with 10 cameras, 4 cameras, and there's even work being done where you can do volumetric capture with just a single cell phone and it uses machine learning to fill in the rest. So today it has been rapidly moving from something that was only accessible at if you rented out a high-end capture stage and volume to where it's being set up and put into place in labs and schools and some people in their homes.
So let me ask you, so we can even put it in, obviously, in the business context. With motion capture, you had artists spending days doing cleanup,
Yeah,
fixing the rigs. Oh, there was an occlusion on the mesh. Everything got kind of messed up. If you
mm-hmm.
take state of the art motion capture right now, like say the very
Yeah.
best that exists, and you put volumetric video there, what is the reduction in time savings? Like, what are we talking about? Just it,
It's yeah,
yeah.
it's
Go ahead.
huge orders of magnitude. So let's pick a project that we were involved with in 2019. In that stage, the Madonna was going to perform live on the Billboard Music Awards with and she wanted to perform with 4 copies of herself,
Oh, I
each
remember
in
that.
the
That was cool.
yeah, each
That
in
was cool.
iconic. Thanks. Yeah, each in her iconic outfits. The production budget and plan to execute on that entire piece for each of those copies of Madonna, if you had done it with a CG technique where you modeled a copy and you motion captured her and then you simulated the clothing, was in the order of like 9-10 months of production time. And I didn't ever get the bid on like how many artists would have been involved in that, but my projection from my experience and background is that probably would have been upwards of 10-15 artists working on that project for that time period. Instead, they did volumetric capture. They brought her into the capture stage. They did 1 day of capture for all 4 performances. And we did 2 weeks of cleanup on that. And a lot
Wow.
of that cleanup was dealing with very small things that are part of the evolution of volumetric capture. So, for example, right now, thin, lacy veils are difficult for volumetric capture. So, there were some artifacts in there that needed hand cleanup. Now, that 2 weeks was something that was enabled by our tools and platforms. Because this is data that is changing frame by frame, if you had decided to do that cleanup directly in an off-the-shelf content creation package like Mari or Maya, the estimate that the team had was it was going to take them 3 months to go through that data and clean it up frame by frame. But what's particular about our platform is it allows you to make a change on one frame and propagate it across the entire time range of a performance, even though the meshes are not the same, the textures are not the same. And so this innovation meant that we could do it in 2 weeks with 3 artists, which is huge orders of magnitude of change.
Yeah, it's huge.
And yeah, and you've been involved in games for a long time. You also
Yeah.
know like there's certain types of clothing that are easy to simulate, but where it gets really difficult are complex layered clothing, where you have things that have increased stiffness or variability in the stiffness across the entire outfit. And so the simulation of the clothing for those outfits would have been insanely time consuming.
Well, so I'm hearing you listen, and clearly
Mm-hmm.
you love this stuff. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
clearly. But how'd you get here, man? Because I mean, we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
volumetric video. You're talking about performance capture. There's a lot that has to do with production here. Can you take us
Yeah.
through how did you end up here?
Absolutely. And I do love it. And what I love, my pure essence, is how do you take difficult problems and from a technical standpoint, new media, new opportunities, and make them accessible to artists in the storytelling process. And my origin was really in computer animation. And I got started straight out of school. I joined Pixar to work on Toy Story. And at that time, there was no pipeline for making computer animated films. There was ILM, right? Like they knew how to do visual effects. There was several, Digital Domain was there, Rhythm and Hues, but they were really doing kind of bespoke special effects pipelines. And so the big question is twofold. How do you build a pipeline that goes from a team that can do 20 shots in a year to a movie that's going to have over 1,600 shots? And more importantly, what is the process and the skills and the talents that you assemble in a team to be able to tell stories with puppets that make them feel alive and make them feel real? And so I built and designed the cinematography department at Pixar. And so this was, what are the tools we're using to construct shots? But also, what is the thinking process to go from a storyboard to a scene that's going to be animated? How do you make people feel like these characters are alive? And that thinking process is not just what are the characters doing, but what is the set that they're placed in? How do you move a scene from one moment to another? And that whole creative journey of storytelling and engagement and making characters feel alive is my roots. And so things like the moment when Woody first is left alone in the Dynaco gas station, and that boom down of the camera into him as he's feeling lost, and the eye darts and the timing of how those relate to him thinking, all were crucial education for me in what is it to make a character feel alive and make them feel connected to you. It is the studying and the boiling down of human performance and human connection and applying it to animation. And I spent 20 years building films for Pixar, for DreamWorks, Toy Story, Bugs Life, Madagascar, How to Train Your Dragon are a few of the films that I worked on. And it was always the storytelling, the connection, making the characters feel alive. And I also have a background as a photographer, which led me into this role in the first place. And around 2014, 2015, I started to see this emergence of VR and 360 video and this extension of storytelling in immersive spaces. And that intrigued me. And then I saw some early research tests with volumetric video, and it blew me away because at that time it was crude. It had tons of artifacts, but it felt real and it felt connected. You could see that it was a person. And the analogy I make is that you can look at a grainy, a black and white photo from pre-Depression era, and it will grab you because it captures a moment and an essence. It's not a simulation. It is the person and them. And you get that with volumetric video. And so I saw that and I thought, this is amazing. And I went to the teams working on this medium, and I said, this looks great, but it feels like a black box. It feels like something that you capture and you play back. And how are you going to enable artists to work with this? How can they alter the performance after a capture? And I just kind of got silence and blinks. And then I started to ask them, like, all right, it looks like these systems have the lighting baked into them and they're very diffuse in their lighting. How are we going to light and stage these characters, these performances within an environment? And I got silence again. And then they said, well, you'll just light the environment to match the capture. And I was like, that's not storytelling. That's not creativity. That's telling somebody that this is like a stenographer's report of the performance, not the input to a creative medium. And I understand it. Technically, it was a difficult problem. And it was also a problem people were thinking about capture. But I felt like that was the thing that was going to take volumetric video to the flexibility and the use cases that were really going to be necessary. And so that's why I founded Arcturus. I and my co-founder set out to solve the problem of how can we make this data editable? How can we make it fast to use? And how can we make it accessible to everyone?
Let me ask you something. When you were there in 2016, 2017, and you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing this amazing technology, and I mean, obviously, it's not 100%, so it's just
Mm-hmm.
very it's emerging. Did you get the same feeling that you had when you were at Pixar and you guys were figuring out 20 to 1500 shots? Was
Yes,
it that? Okay. Can you tell me
absolutely.
about that? Yeah,
Yeah.
this is that moment. Please explain that.
Yeah, this is that epiphany moment, and I've been lucky. I feel like I've had three epiphanies in my lifetime. And it is that realization that there's something new, that it has enormous potential, and that there's no roadmap now at this moment for how to apply it, how to utilize it, and it was the same way walking into Pixar, right? Like amazing pioneers in computer graphics, right? Like my mentors at Pixar when I joined were Bill Reeves, Tom Porter, or Rick Sayer, Eben Otsby, right? Like every single
Wow.
one of these people defined computer graphics, shading, lighting, particle systems came out of the minds of these people. And yet there wasn't yet a full roadmap for how do you create a process, a team? What are the tools you really need to go further or to like tell stories with it? And so it's discovery and it's that sense of unknown. And we would have times where it felt like it was impossible, but we had the passion for the stories that we were making. And there's actually a moment that like is ingrained in my soul now. About three-quarters of the way through Toy Story, it was clear there was no way we could get done by the time the film needed to come out. Like, if you did the math on the amount of rendering left to do, the amount of shots left to animate, um, it was impossible. And we were having a team meeting, and Steve Jobs came into that meeting, and he looked around the room. He didn't say anything for probably a minute. It felt like 5 minutes. And then he said, look, we all know this is impossible. There's no way we can get this done. But look at this room. I know you guys will do this, that this is going to be amazing, and that this film is going to change the world. And we all walked out of that room ready to conquer or all of the technical artifacts and issues and timing. And we did. And then that first moment when you see a child walking down the street, hugging their Woody doll and just in love with the characters you've created. It's uplifting. because you've conquered technology, you've enabled artists, and you've told stories that now touch people.
Yeah.
It took
That
another 10 years to make it easy.
yeah.
But
You
um,
know, I think you nailed something. It's like, the magnitude of the challenge was very visible in that room,
mhm,
but you guys still went for it. And like my son, he's 2 years old, comes down in a Woody costume, and I just laugh because I'm like, oh wow. I'm like, I mean, I remember going to see that movie. I think that was
mhm.
it. That was 93, 94.
It came out in 95. Yeah.
90, oh, 95. So yeah, okay, yeah. I remember going straight and seeing that in the theater. One of the things I'm curious about is, did you study animation? What did you study? I mean, did you go to
Yeah.
college? I mean, let me not
Yeah.
assume. It's just like,
Uh,
because
ab-
it's yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, absolutely. And this is like, this leads to one of my first epiphanies in my life. I was going hard down the track of studying international relations and business, planning on being a politician. I was studying at the University of Mexico in Mexico City,
Wow.
and I realized I hated politics. I hated everything, because the politics around politics is worse than politics. And at one instant, I was walking through Mexico City, and I strolled into the Palacio de Bellas Artes. And this is an enormous, beautiful museum. And I entered one of the large halls just as the entire crowd cleared out. And at the far end was a giant Monet water lily painting, and it just glowed. And it was instant. It was obvious. I was going to art school. And so I shifted my career, packed up my bags, and I moved to Chicago, where I studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And original focus was photography and printmaking. But they had a art and technology group that was a mixture of digital painting, robotics, neon, and reserved for grad students were two SGI Crimsons running. I think it was like Autodesk Car Studio like 1.0 or 2.0.
Were they purple? Was this the purple and blue one?
These were the crimson ones. These were the
Okay.
ones that were like this
Oh yeah.
big,
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
giant.
phew.
Um,
Nice.
and somehow I wheedled my way into that grad student only lab and courseware. Um, and the instructor was an artist at the school, right? She was learning the software at the same time we were. So it was very self taught. But that got me interested in CG and computer graphics. At the time, Chicago was a booming and bustling commercial production and location, and was moving into high end computer graphics and visual effects. This was at the time things like adding shiny spheres to an advertisement. But I also got a part-time job developing software for those post-production facilities, and so taught myself how to program while teaching myself how to animate, and was writing software to integrate film to video transfer systems, early nonlinear editors. So it was at its very roots the like, how do I enable these artists that are running the editing suites to work faster using digital media? And so, yes, I sort of studied animation, but it was self-taught. And then my real study began when I started at Pixar. So I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts. For the first 10 years of my career, every time I went and did a professional talk, I would always walk out onto stage and they'd introduce me as Dr. Johnson, because they'd assume anybody that worked at Pixar had a PhD. But I think that first 10 years of my career was a PhD in animation. It's like working with great talent and
Yeah.
discovering new mediums.
What did your parents think when you said, "I'm not going to be a politician or international relations. I'm going to go work with computers"? Oh no, hold on,
Yeah,
I'm going to be an artist. I'm
yeah.
just. Was that a weird conversation, or they're like, "Ah, no biggie"? I mean,
No, it was not a real big thing. My father is a bit of an eclectic individual as well, so he has a background. He went to medical school to run an ad agency, so he specialized in medical advertising. And then he fell in love with wooden boats, and so he became a wooden boat builder. And so at the age of 8, he and I sailed across the Atlantic in the first wooden boat he had ever built. So
wow.
um, he it gave me a tremendous background, but also a eye to be open to the fact that the world evolves around you and your vision of who you are and what you want to do evolves. So he was very supportive of it. And of course, to actually leave art school and end up in a job that actually makes money is also unusual.
Yes, it is. That's why we have the cliche of the starving artist. But yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, and to land at a place like Pixar, I mean,
Mhm.
wow. I mean,
Yeah,
that just to ask about the boat with your father, do you think, I mean, obviously that must have prepared you to basically face anything then, face a challenge, because I mean that's as challenging as it gets, right?
it did. And it taught me resilience. It taught me also reflection because when you're at sea, we typically sailed with 3 people. So that would be 3 hours on watch where you're the only person on deck, and then 6 hours off where you're doing chores and errands. But in those 3 hours, you're monitoring the boat, you're monitoring the weather, but you're also alone with yourself. So you've got a lot of time to introspect and think and design. And even as early as the age of 8, probably didn't really hit me that much. But later on, in the trips we did when I was 15, 16, 17, it really did hit me as a reflective moment. And we faced some amazing challenges. I mean, you've seen in the movie A Perfect Storm. We were actually caught in that storm.
Oh wow.
That was our first trip. We were in the Georges Banks when it hit. Now we were on a 21-foot sailboat that was tremendously well built and was so much smaller than the waves that we were just like a cork bobbing up and down on the ocean. But the exhilaration after the storm passed when we're sailing again and we're still have 20-foot following seas and you're taking a boat that size down the front of one of those waves, it's amazing. Uh,
I mean, this is an incredible story, and I mean, honestly, it's a perfect segue into the importance of storytelling. I mean, something that I found in this discussion about being in that room, you and the team, Steve Jobs, facing that challenge in front of you, and realizing that it is about the story, realizing that it's about what you want to accomplish. When you look at storytelling specifically now, in terms of basically games, how do you feel about that? I mean, are we in the pre Pixar, pre Toy Story phase, or do you think we've gotten to another place? I mean, how do you feel about that?
I feel like we've gotten to another place. So I think that there's several components that are really important about this. Is that um, there was a time in the gaming space where you either had a big studio and large budgets and could make something that was beautiful and polished and had depth to its story, or it was quirky and very low budget. It was the super indie version, and it might have a distinct story to it, but it would grab a very small segment of the industry. I think kind of the convergence of high quality game engines that are available to independent artists to work. Unreal and Unity in particular, with this availability of digital tools, has enabled the artists to come forward much more. You can now be a sculptor first that can create digital assets. If I think about in 94, 95, we had to hire people that knew Maya first as modelers, or spend a tremendous amount of effort teaching them to grapple with the computer. And I actually had an animator that I worked with on Toy Story, amazing animator, originally a stop motion animator. And after Toy Story, she left because she could not get past the fact that, like, I want to grab the limb and move it. I can't work in this indirect state. And sculpting characters in 94, 95 was that way. It was like, okay, I'm going to build this patch and I'm going to sculpt this patch in here. And now a sculptor comes in, they fire up ZBrush, and they work with the tools that are familiar to them. So I'm kind of going into a bit of a tangent and a long way to say that the tools are very accessible now. They're both from a price standpoint and from the technology of what they can do. And we're seeing small teams, independent teams, create really compelling personal stories that also have polish. I saw a car commercial released just a couple days ago that the entire commercial was done in Unreal, and it was done by a very small team. And I have one of the most critical eyes on the planet for what's CG, couldn't tell. And it's like envisioned by a small team, delivered by a small team, enabled by game engines. So the quality of what you can produce as an independent artist, or as a small team, or as a larger team, has greatly improved. The way that you work with the tools, the accessibility of them, is insanely accessible. And the types of personalities that have moved into this medium are at the storytelling realm, at that core. And that's crucial, right? Because what makes a game compelling? A game is compelling when it has a story, a moment, a theme that the creator cares about. Because when the creator cares about it, the audience resonates with it and they care about it. It either touches their emotional core or makes them think in a way that's very similar. And we're at a renaissance, in my mind, now, in terms of what can be created.
That's incredible, because when you think about this, is like, as you just explained, is that the tools are not getting in the way of the story.
Exactly.
Now, so it's like almost like the tools have diffused themselves back, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's all about just, well, as primal as us being 3,000 years ago. There's a
Yeah.
fire in front of us. Let's tell a story, a compelling story.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, as you see volumetric video rising,
Mm-hmm.
is this going to be something where real-time video games, do you think we'll get to a game completely in volumetric video with performance capture and everything? Is that where you see this going?
I do. And I think that there's styles that this will be right for. When you get to pure fantasy worlds of monsters and creatures, it'll still make sense to mocap and follow traditional production pipelines in some cases. But I see there being three encumbrances to true expansion of immersive experiences in games being everywhere. One of them is availability of artist talent to populate these worlds. It takes a special kind of artist to tell stories in games and to have the story they want to tell and the ability to do the modeling, to do the animation, and to create specific looks. And volumetric capture shortcuts that, because what do you have to do? You've got to find the performer that matches the vision. You got to find the outfits or design the costumes that fit that. But then you simply film the performance. And so you can iterate over these performances much faster. Your range of accessible talent is limited to the performers you can find, not the artists you can find to replicate it. So you radically increase the space of who can populate these worlds, which also means more diverse worlds. You see this a lot in video games where it's like the world feels very homogenistic because you got a limited budget for creating characters. You create 3 core background characters, and then you create 10 variants of them. And yeah, it doesn't feel like you're repeating everybody, but if you close your eyes and squint, it's one world. It doesn't represent the diversity of where we are. So that's one aspect that I think volumetric capture solves, the availability of artists. The second aspect is speed of turnaround. You can go from having a capture to having it in an experience within 24 hours now. Realistically, for deep branching narrative stories where you're interacting with the volumetric capture, there's still a lot of work to do to make that completely seamless, but we're focused on doing that. And then the third aspect that I think is really interesting is on-demand delivery. So I look at games today and I say that games and game engines are the foundation of the metaverse. And to me, the metaverse is not a single platform that I go to experience a world. It is a spatial representation of the world that we inhabit for entertainment, gaming, commerce, and socializing. And all of those are converging in these worlds. But what is the one thing that really prevents them from taking off is having to download these worlds before you enter them. And so when you can stream the experience and you can be in an open world that you step into, say, the Gucci store, and suddenly all of the assets are there and people are walking around in the clothing so you can see it in motion, that's where the universe is going to explode in terms of availability. And we provide solutions to stream the volumetric video into these worlds. And other teams are working fast and hard on how do you stream the environments. And those two aspects are going to converge, and you have instant on-demand accessibility of human performance. You're going to see whole new modes of engagement, and you're going to see people stepping into a club to watch a musical performance that's all inside of this game engine. And by the way, 10% of these volumetric avatars that you're seeing in the club happen to be models that are showcasing the latest line of clothing from LV or Hermes. And by the way, you can click on it and be taken right away into the virtual store. I think that is amazing for the opportunity of the space. Well, volumetric video drives me by the human connection and the truth of performance. And I think, going back to your question, it is a key to certain types of gaming experiences that are based on storytelling and human emotion and connection.
That's amazing, man. And I'm completely see where you're going with this, and I agree with you. What advice would you have for someone who wants to follow in your footsteps, who says, you know what, I want to be you and I want to get there?
Mhm.
What would you tell them? What should they do?
Yeah. There's a few things. One is make sure you're following your passion. Make sure that this is something that is motivational and inspiring to you. The the reason why is many of these journeys are difficult and can be time consuming, and you've got to love them. But more importantly, when you're working on a problem that you're passionate about, you really do help inspire the world. You know, don't go into this because you think that it's going to be the next best way to make money. It's like you want to tell stories, you want to engage with people, you want to enable, in my case, enable artists and tell stories. I think that the best lessons I learned from art school and from filmmaking is what taught me to be the what I think is the best of my entrepreneurial spirit, which is don't be afraid to take risks, show your work early, embrace critique yourself, and be willing to stand by your vision, even when people tell you you're wrong. But don't be so stubborn about it that you don't listen to the critique and be willing to accept that, you know, maybe this particular idea, this particular element was not right. Um, and listen to between the lines. Learn to listen to not the words that somebody is telling you, but the meaning behind them. So, somebody may, if you're working on a cinematic element for a game, somebody may come to you and say, I think you need to change this shot from a close up to a wide shot because I don't like how that character looks. And what you really need to be listening to is there's something in that sequence that means that particular shot is not landing. It's not serving its purpose. And questioning in that particular storytelling moment, do I change that shot or do I change the lead into that shot? How crucial is that particular moment and that composition to the story that I am trying to land? And so, that acceptance of critique, that willingness to be critiqued, and that ability to step out from what story you're trying to tell, what you believe people are seeing in your story, and listen to what they're telling you they're seeing is crucial.
It's very well said, and I think you can apply that to life. You can
Yeah,
apply that to business.
yeah.
I mean, those are amazing words of wisdom, and really, it's completely true. The ability to reflect, take
Mm,
criticism, critique yourself, try again. I mean,
yeah.
that's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing that with the audience. You know, having people like yourself with such a storied career and having tried different things and not being afraid to try and to change. It's super important, especially because in the end of the day, when we talk about video games, the entire concept of gaming is try and try again. If you really think
Mm-hmm.
about it, that's what this is all
Yeah.
about. You know, as we get coming winding down this discussion, I'd be curious if there's anything else you think people should know. Is there anything you'd like to leave to the guests or to the audience, I should say, on this? Anything else?
I mean, I think you actually just left them with the best tidbit of all, which is try and try again. I think that the the essence of creativity, of building games, building stories, and honestly building companies is being willing to accept that some avenues are a failure. And what is your job as an artist or an entrepreneur? It is, how do I get to the failures as fast as possible so that I can also get to the successes as fast as possible? And so that's why it's important to share your work early, to discuss your ideas, discuss your vision, because you need that external signal. We all have tunnel vision. If we just teach to ourselves, wait until things are perfect. And so it's that type of spirit. Things that seem impossible to overcome have been the best moments in my life for what I've built and who I've become. There were small things like early on in Monsters Incorporated, it was going to be so difficult to produce the whole film that we had creative restrictions on the number of shots we could have in a particular sequence. And the producer would literally tell me, well, you can have 20 shots in this sequence. I never hit those, but it forced, like, I'd go into those moments with a constraint, and it would make me think about the creative storytelling process in a different way. That just opened up new doors. And there's one more thing that relates to all of this, and this is, I think, really crucial. Ideas are easy to come up with. Implementation, delivery, and completion of those ideas are really difficult. And so I find a lot of people in the art world and in the business world are afraid to share their ideas early because they're worried somebody is going to steal it. And they miss out on important learnings about where they need to go. And I think it's much better to be open, to seek feedback, seek criticism, talk about what you're doing and planning on building. Be ready to be told you're crazy, that it's unimportant. The key thing I got told in 2016 when I started this process was every single one of the capture teams working on capture told me, you're working on a dead end because we're just going to make capture perfect and they won't need editing tools. And I said, absolutely, I'm expecting you to make captures perfect. And that's going to make even a greater need for editing tools. But I wasn't afraid to go to them and say, hey, you guys are already in this space. I'm coming into this space and I'm tackling it from this angle. And here's why I think this is important. And the things that they told me were never going to work about it helped guide my vision to the tech I was building and helped me understand if I was going on the right path for artist tools, which I believe we were.
It's been incredible speaking to you, and I want to have you on the show again. I definitely want to. I gingerly walked around your Pixar days, but I'm sure everyone wants to know about them. So
Yeah.
expect an invitation so we can get into that one. Really, Ewan, thank you for spending time with us on Video Games Real Talk. I sincerely appreciate it. How can people find you, reach out to you? What are your social tags?
Great. So Arcturus.studio is our company site. I'm on LinkedIn as Ewan Johnson, and on Twitter as _EwanJ. And those are the two primary places. I am on Facebook as well, but really those are the two socials that I'm on more often than not. And I forget my Instagram handle, but that's where I post my casual photography. Let me look that up for you real quickly, because if people are curious about the photos I grab while I'm on my business journeys, my Instagram is Ewan H. Johnson, and it's been and fairly slow over the past couple of years because I haven't been doing a lot of travel, but it's going to be picking up again because I've been doing a lot of travel recently.
Definitely. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. And for our listeners out there, this begins season 4 as we move forward. Thanks to you and again for coming to the show. Every week we're releasing a new episode. If you have any comments, questions, please feel free to feedback, share it back, share it with your friends, let us know. As always, we're out here. We're looking forward to seeing you all on the next edition of Video Games Real Talk. And we'll see you all later. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.